Why does Lost in Vivo sound like the name of some punk album or something? Lost in Vivo was released back in November of 2018 for PC and was made by a single dude named Akuma Kira. This is the same guy who made that Spooky's House of Jump Scares game, which I'm sure you watched all those Let's Play channels do back in the day. Lost in Vivo's a first-person survival horror game that's often referred to by fans of the game as first-person Silent Hill, which I find pretty fitting given the locations you're visiting and the general style of the enemies that you encounter. But I still think these two games are very different and have their own unique experiences. I actually played this game when it came out, and I remember liking it a decent amount, but for whatever reason, on this playthrough for my video, I actually fell in love with the game even more, and somehow I found the game even creepier this time around. Jesus fucking Christ. I literally remember this part, bro, and I was expecting it, everything. I was walking up, I was like, here it comes, and somehow it still got me. Like, Jesus Christ, my heart. While this game was talked about by a few bigger YouTubers, such as Pyrocynical, it actually seems that around most circles of gamers, the game goes pretty much unknown, which really sucks because the game deserves to be regarded along the industry giants like Resident Evil and Amnesia in my opinion. The story for Lost in Vivo is rather an interesting tale, especially for a horror game. It's simple yet infinitely complex. It's kinda similar to something like Dark Souls. The story is honestly as complex or as simple as you want it to be. For what's presented directly to the player, it's a rather simple story of presumably a woman who has dealt with some trauma in her past, so she's given a therapy dog that she loses one day as it sucked down a storm drain during a thunderstorm. So she does the only thing sensible that any pet owner would do and goes after her dog. What ensues after this is just an absolute fever dream of a game where reality is constantly warping around you and you'll end up in locations that make no sense on how they're connected to the last location. You travel from sewers to subways to some kind of nightmarish hellscape to some mines, and then obviously the obligatory top secret science labs. Even at this level of understanding, the game is terrifying and interesting, as by not knowing much, your mind runs wild with what could be going on here, how these creatures got down here, and by constantly breaking reality and subverting the player's expectations, it adds to that tension and anxiety the player feels, as you truly don't know what's around every corner. Now, if you do take the time to take in every environment, even down to the graffiti, then you can see just how much of this world explains itself in the creatures that inhabit it. For instance, pretty early on you come across a note from a stranger who's taken to living here for some reason, and then you slowly start to notice that he was going insane and feeling like he was being watched by something. So he cuts his eyes out so that he can't see what's watching him, even though it seems like there was never anything there and he was just paranoid and imagining something. So you carry on down the tunnels and you happen upon a drawing of something. You go up for a closer inspection and you can see that it's a man who's cut his eyes out and is holding them in his hands, blood all over him. And then BAM! Some dude is behind you trying to make you his next victim. This whole time, not a single word is being spoken by the player or a single other person in the game, and all that knowledge that I just told you is gathered from a few scattered letters and one drawing on a wall. And honestly, this is pretty tame for what comes later in the game, and I think that tells you just how terrifying this game really is. Cause some games don't even achieve this amount of horror in their entire runtime, and this game did it in about the first 15 minutes. Lost in Vivo takes yet another note out of Silent Hill when it's implied that the notebook paper that you're finding throughout the game are actually from your own journal, and that the trauma that led you to getting your now lost dog is that of bulimia and depression. This is when the world around you starts to morph and reflect the player's inner turmoil. We go against shattered and warped mirrors that reflect her warped image of herself, and you have a puzzle that has you moving in an infinite loop down a hallway that leads to a room that locks you in if you eat an apple on the table, and it won't release you until you throw up the apple. And each time you return to the room, you must face increasing numbers of parasites, which are meant to represent the player's view of their own mental illness, as if it were some kind of parasite on their mind. The solution to the puzzle also tries to demonstrate to the player their attempt to overcome their own mind, as you have to eat the apple and then simply walk through the bars you believe to be holding you in the room this whole time. This is meant to show that mental illness often makes us feel trapped and clouds our judgment on how to overcome our own troubles, and makes the logical solution seem impossible or wrong. The game always seems to go out of its way to make you question everything around you, or even if what's happening to you in this game is real, or if you just died and you're in some kind of purgatory. The game's constantly doing fourth wall breaks by trying to pull things like making you think the game is crashing or having Unity errors pop up on the bottom side of the screen, but after a first playthrough, these lose all scare factor, as you know it's just the game trying to fake you out and fuck with you in any way it can. The game has so many more examples like this, but I don't want to take all day. Plus, it's pretty rare for a story in horror games to be this interesting and deep, so I don't want to spoil every nook and cranny of it. Also, even though I've beaten this game twice now, there are still plenty of sections to the game that I've heard mentioned, but I still have no idea how you get to. And there were certain sections in my first playthrough that I experienced that never happened in my second. So replaying this game for the ability to find every piece of lore seems to be the draw of it, and the developer clearly intended you to play it multiple times. You're gonna wanna replay this game too if you wanna see every possible ending that it has to offer, which totals up to 5. Just like Silent Hill, some of these endings are pretty cryptic on what you need to do to get them also. The game uses these multiple endings as a way to tease you as well, as one of the bad endings has you leaving the sewers without finally saving your dog, and they put this ladder about 15 minutes away from the good ending, so if you want to get out sooner, you're gonna have to settle for the bad ending, but if you want the truly good ending, you're gonna have to endure another unnerving crawl through a tight, claustrophobic set of tubes, and then one final standoff with yet more nightmarish creatures. Bro, don't do me like this. I just want to fucking get out of here, please. Like, why do you have to make me feel bad? Like, it's bad enough to have the dog whimpering in the background, but now you gotta put this fucking text up that says, hey, you're a bad person. The secrets that this game hides are just crazy, and people later found out that you can actually play a whole second game if you play this game at midnight. It goes from the moody and atmospheric survival horror game into a horror-inspired hack and slash game. Lost in Vivo is a survival horror game in its truest sense. It doesn't rely on all of that let's make you defenseless to make you scared bullshit that a lot of modern horror games do nowadays. Trust me, if I couldn't kill these things, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be alive to make this video for you, as my heart would have given out a long time ago. You know what? You can keep them. Who needs a therapy dog anyways? I mean, what are they even good for? What did he even do for me? Cuddle me, make me feel safe? Like, who cares? If he wanted to be saved, he wouldn't have fallen down in these sewers in the first place. As far as your arsenal's concerned, you're given a sledgehammer fairly early on, which you can always rely on if you run out of ammo. And later on you find a pistol, shotgun, and a kitchen knife, which help you take out all manner of hellspawn. And trust me, you're going to need every single one of them. Speaking of hellspawn, this game probably throws at least a dozen or so unique monster designs at you throughout the game, all of which have really intricate details that, if you somehow take the time to look at, they can give you better insight as to what they may represent to the player or the world around you.
Holy Jesus! What is that? What the fuck is that?
One thing I will say though concerning the enemies is that once you see one of the enemy types and get a feel for how they move and sound, they lose a good bit of their scare factor, which is probably why the game rotates in new enemy types at least every 15 minutes or so. And on top of the terrifying enemy design, the game actually uses 3D spatial audio, which really heightens that feeling of dread you get when you clearly hear that there's something around the corner, and you can just tell by the horrifying noises that it's making exactly where it is, but you can't seem to muster that strength to move around that corner. Surprisingly enough though, unlike the classic survival horror games it's taking inspiration from, this game has regenerating health. And yes, it is pretty slow on the regen, but it's regenning nonetheless, and I think this is a bit of a letdown on a couple of different levels. First off, games used to use fixed healing as a mechanic because it further increased anxiety levels, as it was just one more resource you had to keep track of and manage, and you were bound to have a moment or two in the game where you're low on ammo and 1 or 2 hits away from death, and the game just expects you to make do. Also, the game doesn't do a good job at explaining what health level you're at or how long it takes for you to regen back to full. And you can say what you want about Call of Duty, but that game definitely indicates very well what status of health you're at, and due to the lack of distinction on what level of health you're at, you can often have unfair deaths because you run into an encounter thinking you can take a hit or two when actually you're right on death's door. In the end though, the game gives you enough tools to use and enemies to use them on to keep you engaged, even though the formula this creates isn't the most original, as the varying locations and enemy designs are constantly keeping you on your toes and giving you that new horror to piss your pants over. The game even throws in a few puzzles throughout the game, but they're pretty simple and usually rely on just reading notes or finding keys that are laid out in nearby rooms, or by using some context clues found in the environment. Most of these are pretty simple and boring, but there are a few that are actually pretty good and make you think a little, like that infinite hallway with the apple that I talked about earlier, but most of them are too simple to be engaging. You already know I know jack shit about what makes music actually good, so I'll keep this brief into just opinions. So, of course, take this with a grain of salt. And with that said, I absolutely love this soundtrack. It just really amplifies the mood of the game, and it just raises my anxiety levels far past safe levels. This is yet another aspect in which This game takes heavy inspiration from Silent Hill, as it has that similar industrial sound where lots of tracks have this metallic banging type sound to them that really feels like the rusted walls around you are alive and beating. Though I'd also like to note there are multiple times throughout the game where there is no ambient music, which is somehow equally unnerving as it feels too quiet, as all you can hear is your footsteps, and this leaves you to be uncomfortable with your own thoughts. To put into perspective just how terrifying this game is, I knew I only had probably about 30 minutes left in the game until I got to the end, and I procrastinated the ever-living shit out of playing that for as long as I could, because I really was that terrified of playing this game. It's one of the most paralyzing and oppressive games I've probably ever played. When I finished this game, it felt like I could finally breathe clean air again, and as if some kind of gunk had finally been cleaned off my skin. The game sinks its teeth into you and won't let go of you until the very last possible second that it can. If you're looking for a good mood setter for Halloween or just looking for a good scare, then you can't do much better than Lost in Vivo. If you're a fan of my content, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more, and once again, this is Trevor, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.